I am Monami Dasgupta, and I am head of D91 Labs, which is the research wing of Setu, a fintech company owned by Pine Labs. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn and read all about our work on d91labs.org. A little bit more about myself. I have been working in the financial inclusion sector for more than 8 years in various capacities from academics, research, and currently as head of research. And to be very honest with you, there's still a lot of research left to be done. So today we will be touching upon a couple of topics, and we will basically start from why do we need to conduct research on financial inclusion in fintech, what does D91 Labs do, identify any research question, and tell you the process and how we do it and how we weave that into product development. I'll also talk about how we conduct research. Then we'll delve a little bit upon the case for a research arm that produces open source research. And lastly, we'll touch upon the challenges that come along in building an open source research entity. Okay, so at D91 Labs, what we're really doing is we are attempting to understand the financial lives, their choices and decisions, and the impact that financial products can have on various last mile customers. These are people who are not traditionally served and are often underserved population of India. We also want to understand how various financial instruments help them to meet their life goals. In this context, the work that we do at D91 Labs is primarily geared towards the following group of participants. One, we try to speak a lot with the fintech and financial institution. Secondly, we also try to comment on regulatory and industry body policies that are released. Thirdly, we deal a lot with the last mile customers and mid mile customers and engage with them in various methods. And lastly, we also engage with multiple user researchers and designers to present our findings in a better format. The way in which we put out our research outputs are typically in forms of publication of contextual user research, industry expert insights, as well as create playbooks. I would like to mention here that all our content is open source and everything that we do is on our website. And that is our biggest USP at D91 Labs because our intent is to pay it back to the fintech industry. One of our larger goals in creating D91 Labs is to bridge the empathy gap between various stakeholders of the financial ecosystem. I will talk a little bit more about D91 Labs in some time. But before we go ahead, I also want to focus on the need to conduct research between financial inclusion and fintech. I don't know how many of you all already know this, but yesterday there was a very important report that was published by the World Bank. It's the Global Fintechs report. And that's a report that comes out every few years to tell us what is the status of financial inclusion in developing and developed countries. And some of the slides and figures that you see on the slide is illuminating on how far we've reached and how much more work is to be done. So for instance, a lot of people in India, almost 78% of Indians have bank accounts now, but only 1/3 of that population ends up using those bank accounts, and they are inactive for various reasons that we can discuss later. But when we move to understanding how far have we gone with digital payments and in comparison to other developing countries, how far have we gone? We've really not done as well as we think we have done. We've definitely come a long way, but nevertheless, we still have a very, very long way to go. Beyond these data points, I would also like to talk about some of other data points that are important. We know now from the recent data that there are 6 billion UPI transactions per month. But it's interesting to note that this 6 billion UPI transaction is actually stemming from 12% of the population. So all of us sitting in, fintech offices and creating products really are building more or less for the same overlapping 12%. And there's a huge need to build for people beyond those 12%, for people in tier 3, tier 4, and beyond, and smaller cities and rural areas. This is nothing, there's no level of, happiness to, tell you that in terms of other financial products, only 17% of India holds any life insurance product and less than 10% hold any pension product. Around 70% of the urban population in India holds and uses credit cards and debit cards. It's pretty encouraging. But when we move to rural areas, only 40% of India uses any of these instruments. On one hand, we have the good news that people are moving away from informal sources of, borrowing debt, which is good because a lot of those debt is exploitative at usurious rates. But at the same time, the level of indebtedness per household is increasing by leaps and bounds, and that should be, alarming and a big point of concern for us. Of course, there are multiple facets to serving the population of Bharat, and we are far away from providing complete access and products and services. And if you look a little bit closer to all the products that are available in the market today, you will soon come to observe that these products are built for people with steady income, who are accustomed to digital products, who are probably from the digitally native population and can be onboarded with ease and very less friction. This, however, does not represent all of India. Many Indians currently are still part of the informal economy. They earn variable incomes, and not only variable incomes, they earn irregular incomes, which means that they don't know how much they will get and they don't know when they will get that payment. They also undertake a lot of cash-based transaction and depend heavily on informal sources to serve their needs. So if we are talking about a medical emergency, we would think insurance, but they would think a loan from their friends and families or a money lender. We are yet to understand their lives and design better financial products. So coming back to what does D91 Labs really do? These are the gaps that D91 Labs really focuses on. So we conduct research on themes that are at the intersection of fintech and financial inclusion. What we do is try to understand the population that's new to banking, that has low trust in the digital system, probably belongs to a lower income household, and generally has a lower bargaining power with money as well as with tech. A lot of this population also are not primary decision makers when it comes to money. And some of you might come back to say that, but we've seen them use mobile phones and smartphones frequently, and that's not entirely untrue. Very often, this population is a frequent user of WhatsApp, Facebook, and even apps like Telegram, and some other entertainment apps as well. But when it comes to payment apps or credit apps, they would rather stay away from it, go the long mile of investing in land or in depreciating real estate asset rather than explore more sophisticated but difficult products like mutual funds. Here, D91 comes in to capture in-depth insight into user views and actions through direct observation, diary studies, video capture, and artifact analysis. Ours is also an open source research which captures user profile, builds personas, understands their interaction with money, understands how they go about doing their budgeting, wealth management, repayment, as well as expense management. After this, we will go around to building personas with depending on the various socioeconomic economic characteristics that they belong from, segment the population and understand what is the kind of target addressable market for various kinds of products and what products are actually missing in the market in this day and age. I'm sure the next obvious question is, okay, you all do this research, but how do you all go about conducting this research? And let me spend some time explaining that to you. So, of course, we are housed within a fintech company, but we are not limited by the need to do specific research on a specific financial product. We can really choose what questions we want to, spend our time and energies on. We have a more exploratory approach to discovering the financial needs of people, and that helps to keep our methods open-ended as well as survive the test of time. That is to say that we maintain our autonomy and independence in defining the research questions. However, if synergies emerge within Setu's potential areas of business, then by all means, we are open to following it through. We conduct research on understanding the financial lives of various cohorts of the population and the various themes that intersect financial inclusion in fintech. Some of the cohorts that we've discussed on our website and that you can also see currently are, a woman from tier 1, 2, 3 cities, kirana store owners, millennials, and many more. The next thing I would like to discuss is how do we conduct our research. One way in which we conduct our research is we build our hypothesis, and then we go on to the field to either validate or refute our hypothesis. So we build an hypothesis around the one aspect of the financial life of the last mile or the mid mile, and then we go ahead to see if we can find claims that support prove this hypothesis right or no. So, for instance, let me give you an example of a study that we did very recently. In one of our recent interactions in the field, we believe that all the shopkeepers and the small store owners, the kiranas and the even the street vendors that are offering QR based or that are accepting QR based payment from their customers would themselves be confident to use those UPI and QR based platforms for their own personal transactions. So if I'm offering my QR to accept that payment, I would also be equally okay with using that to send money to either back home in my hometown or to some other friends or families, or even undertake some POS based some transaction to get a entire round of transaction completed. But our assumptions were busted in the fieldwork that we conducted in some local markets in Bangalore, where we found that shopkeepers, specifically of small stores, are pretty skeptical about using payment apps for their own personal transaction. If they really have to use them in a pinch, they would rather take help of their children or of other family members who are probably a little bit more tech savvy and use those apps for their benefit. For them, the flow is actually to accept payment through UPI and then go to the bank and withdraw all the money from the bank account as soon as possible. The reason why they are accepting UPI payments or QR based payments is they don't want to forego that business, and they fear that if they don't offer that kind of mode of payment, the customer might not stick around and might and not end up buying the product from them. Imagine a profile like this. If any fintech company is going to use those apps and provide third party products on those apps, then it won't even reach them because they're not even exploring the platform. One of the other findings that we also found from the study is that having a human at the end of a customer grievance center plays a much bigger role than having a chatbot when you are trying to raise a banking related complaint. The moment there's a human approach to serving the last mile population, the confidence in using that kind of platform and app increases by leaps and bounds. So this is really one way of approaching our research. The other way that we approach research is to not have any predefined hypothesis, but to actually capture the financial journey of people. Here we want to capture real stories, real experiences, real finances, and that is, one notch above just a plain statistic. We want to understand what all influences a person's financial journey, their budgeting, how they tie finances with their life goals and their family's life goals, and how this differs across urban, rural, gender, and various income and economic classes. When we come to concrete research methods, it really depends on what the research question is and how much resources and format we want to follow to get to the answers of those questions. We've used methods such as one-on-one personal field interviews. We've used virtual interviews, focus group discussion, as well as game-based methods like card sorting when the research question is probably a taboo question or is a sensitive topic. For engaging with the other side of this entire ecosystem, which is the practitioners, the regulators, the fintech, PMs, we try to hold roundtables as well as do collaborative initiatives and engage with them either to spread our findings or to understand from them what they are seeing among their customers. If I really have to tell you, structure out how we conduct user research at a fintech company, I'll go over it briefly. If anybody wants to know it in detail, I'm happy to take a one-on-one call later. But broadly speaking, we follow like 10 to 11 steps in how we do it. First, we go around trying to define the problem statement. That is to understand what aspect of financial behavior of this person or of this household are you trying to understand better. Second, we try to understand what would be your research objectives. What is your goal? Are you trying to gauge if they are able to navigate an app screen or a payment app screen, or are you trying to understand their behaviors with respect to transaction at the end of the month or beginning of the month, etc. Third, if you have your research objective in place, what would be the method that you would use to go around and find the answers that help you reach your research objectives? Would it be in person, virtual, game based, etc.? Depends. Comes at this stage. Next, we go on to a very crucial aspect of conducting research is recruitment and improving the participation of respondents for the research. So how will you go about recruiting them? Whom will you recruit? What should be their profile? What should be their personas? And what are the things that we should keep in mind so that we don't have any dubious responses? Next, we build out an interview guide. We try to understand what are the questions we want to ask, how much depth do we want to go in, what kind of language do we want to conduct the interview in, and all of those aspects. After this really comes around, conducting the interview and coming back to doing the analysis. So here you can either do a competitive analysis or a heuristic analysis. You synthesize and analyze the data using different, ways and modes of tools. Either you do a Miro board or you do a dovetail, depending on what is really aligning with your research goals. You also kind of try to, take out some of the insights from the interviews, have them as quotes, have them as affinity diagrams, and generate outputs. If you can also kind of build out personas and customer journey maps from these studies. And ultimately, you would also want to report any kind of usability testing that you might have done for a specific product or a service. So this is really broadly, the process that we follow. Of course, there can be a lot of other steps that would depend on the kind of research question and bandwidth that each entity has. Now, I would like to quickly touch upon why do we need an open source research platform, and is there a good use case for hiring a person in your fintech company to do this open source research? In my opinion, and given D91 Labs experience, I feel that there's a strong case for fintech organizations to hire researchers as well as digital anthropologists who can bring in a people-centered perspective to technology transformation, as well as to other functions apart from fintech, like hiring, product design, and customer service. Ultimately, your biggest USP will always be serving your customers as efficiently as possible. With their understanding of what happens when people meet with technology, they interface both sides of the ecosystem, that is the customer side as well as the product development side. To build a team that is, let's say, similar to D91 Lab that conducts independent and autonomous research, you need a few things apart from, of course, founder support and vision. And those few things would be expertise, empathy, engagement, and enthusiasm. Expertise to know what cues to look for, what questions to ask, and avoid standardizing the format when you're going out to do the research. Empathy, a very important factor, is to build trust, leave biases aside, encourage any difference of thoughts and opinions that you might have with your customers and respondents, and not impose your view and product on them, as well as understand where they're coming from. Next is engagement. Engagement would be to engage with the stakeholders that you are, building out these research questions for, and also to kind of share with them as frequently as possible what your findings are, as well as encourage feedback to your findings. And lastly, enthusiasm is very important. Enthusiasm to probe further, enthusiasm to conduct the interview, and as well as go the whole mile in finishing the project, even if your responses start showing a repetitive pattern. There's a lot of merit in conducting user research at every step of product development prior to conceptualizing, prior to even understanding what product is needed. And at the end, after the product is delivered, how is the experience among the people who are using the products? Of course, this does come with challenges when you're trying to build out an open source research entity within your fintech company. The first challenge would be that autonomy does come at a cost. And the cost is often about who is going to fund your research. One of the tenets of open source research is the level of understanding that you need to have between a funder as well as the researchers, with an understanding that whatever research we will end up do will be open source. So there is a level of altruistic motive here where you want to spread your learnings with the fintech ecosystem and industry as much as possible. For D91, we have been internally funded for most of the research, except for one of our projects in the past that we've been funded by a big tech company, but with the understanding that all the findings that we have there will be open source and would be put on our website. The other challenge is, of course, one of the very big challenges in this field is to get access to relevant and even recent data sources. Many times you will observe that data sources are siloed within the organization. So a North Star would be to get access to anonymized proprietorship data to understand, customer interaction, their trends, their take-up, their daily usage metrics, monthly usage metrics, and also understand what gaps exist because of which customers are not, going the whole journey of using the app, or even what are the drop-off points for various customers. And third challenge is an overarching challenge is to convince startups that there is a need to understand their users, right? So multiple times, and I'm sure a lot of fintech companies can vouch for this, multiple times product and features that are rolled out in the fintech industry are done without doing any sort of user research or user testing. They fail at a later age pretty often. In the fintech space, product development usually happens in two ways. Either the company copy paste what's working in the ecosystem, in the economy, with a little bit of tweak in the target addressable market or incentives and cost, or just ramping up the product a little bit more, or basically stick around to do what's allowed by the regulatory body. There is so much scope to build, innovate new products, suitable products for the mid-mile and last mile. There is so much, work still to be done to reach them in a better format, in a better way, so that they can benefit from the digital innovations and interventions, and can spend less time thinking about money, but more time making money. This approach is really is based on what people require for, especially those who are not salaried, have volatile and uncertain cash flows, and are generally constrained users. With that, I would like to conclude, and the stage is open for any question and answers, comments, and feedback. My personal details are on the right-hand side of the slide. You can reach out to us, and it would be great if you also follow our work on our various platforms. Thank you.